Shadowing. So our channel is simple. In order to be an effective communicator, regardless of if it's planned or spontaneous, you need to have your anxiety under control. So we'll start there. Second, we're going to talk about is some ground rules for the interactivity we'll have today. And finally, we're going to get into the heart of what we will be covering. And as I said, lots of activity, and I invite you to participate. So let's get started with anxiety management. 85% of people tell us that they are nervous when speaking in public, and I think the other 15% are lying. And okay, we could create a situation where we could make them nervous too. In fact, just this past week, a study from Chapman University asked Americans, what are the things you fear most? And among being caught in a surprise terrorist attack, having your identity was stolen was public speaking. Among the top 5 was speaking in front of the public. This is a ubiquitous fear, and one that I believe we can learn to manage. And I use that word manage very carefully because I don't think we ever want to overcome it. And anxiety actually has it. It gives us energy, has us focus, tells us what we are doing is important. But we want to learn to manage it. So I'd like to introduce you to a few techniques that can work, and all of these techniques are based on academic research. But before we get there, I'd love to ask you, what does it feel like when you're sitting in the audience and watching a nervous speaker present? How do you feel? Shout, feel things. How do you feel? Uncomfortable. I heard many of you going, yes, uncomfortable. It feels very awkward, doesn't it? So what do we do? Now, a couple of you probably like watching somebody suffer, okay? But most of us don't. So what do? We sit there and we nod and we smile, or we disengage. And to the nervous speaker looking out at his or her audience, seeing a bunch of people nodding, disengaged, that does not help. So we need to manage our anxiety, because fundamentally the job as a communicator, regardless of if it's planned or spontaneous, is to make your audience comfortable. Because if they're comfortable, they can receive your message. And when I say comfortable, I'm not referring to the fact that your message has to be sugar-coated and nice for them to hear. It can be a harsh message, but they have to be in that place where they can receive it. So it's incumbent on you as a communicator to help your audience feel comfortable, and we do that by managing our anxiety. So let me introduce you a few techniques that I think you could do right away to help you feel more comfortable. The first has to do with when you begin to feel those anxiety symptoms. For most people, this happens in the initial minutes prior to speaking. In this situation, what happens is many of us begin to feel whatever it is that happens to you. Maybe your stomach gets a little gurgly. Maybe your legs begin to shake. Maybe you begin to perspire, and then we start to say ourselves, oh my gosh, I'm nervous. They're gonna tell us I'm nervous. This is not gonna go well, and we start spiraling out of control. So research on mindful attention tells us when we begin to feel those anxiety symptoms, we simply greet our anxiety and say, hey, this is me feeling nervous. I'm about to do something of consequence. It's simply by greeting our anxiety and acknowledging it is normal and natural Heck, 85% of people tell us they have it. You actually can stem the tide of that anxiety spiraling out of control. It's not necessarily going to reduce the anxiety, but it will stop it from spinning out. So next time you begin to feel those anxiety signs, take a deep breath and say, "This is me feeling anxious." I notice a few of you taking note. There's a handout that will come at the end. It has everything that I'm supposed to say. Okay, it's can't guarantee I'm gonna say, but you have it. In addition to this approach, a technique that works very well. This is a technique that I helped to do some research on way back when I was in graduate school, has to do with reframing how you see the speaking situation. Most of us, when we are up presenting, planned or spontaneous, we feel that we have to do it right and we feel like we are performing. How many of you have ever acted, done singing or dancing? I'm not going to ask you for performances now, okay? We should note that we could do next year. Maybe a talent show of alums. It looks like we got a talent there, okay? So when you perform, you know that there's a right or wrong way to do it. If you don't hit your right note, you write your right line at the right time, at the right place, you've made a mistake. It messes up the audience. It messes up the people on stage. But when we present, there's no right way. There's certainly better or worse ways, but there's no one right way. But there's no right way. So we need to look at presenting as something other than performance. And what I'd like to suggest is what we need to see is this as a conversation. And what I'd like to suggest is what we need to is what conversation. And right now I'm having a conversation with 100 plus per people, rather than saying I'm performing for you. But it's not just enough to say this is just a conversation. I want to give you a concrete things you can do. First, start with questions. Questions by their nature are dialogue, they're two-way. What was one of the very first things I did here for you? I had you count the number of F's and raise your hands. Ask you a question that gets your audience involved. It makes it feel to me as a presenter and if we are in conversation. So use question. They can be rhetorical, they can be polling. Perhaps I actually want to hear information from you. In fact, I use questions when I create an outline for my presentations. Rather than writing bullet points, I list questions that I'm going to answer.